Good evening and welcome to the February 26, 2020 meeting of the East Lansing Planning Commission. Mr. Haywood, would you please call roll?
Chairperson Bowman.
Here.
Vice Chair Boyle.
Here.
Commissioner Cahill.
Here.
Commissioner Downs.
Here.
Commissioner Kusler.
Here.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Here.
Commissioner Watson.
Here.
Commissioner Williams. And Commissioner Wolf.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. You have in front of you a copy of the agenda for this evening's meeting. I would entertain a motion to approve that agenda.
So moved. Second.
That's been moved by Commissioner Kusler and seconded by Commissioner Downs. Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, that motion carries. We also have a couple of copies of minutes of past meetings in your packet. We'll start with the January 22nd, 2020 meeting. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of that meeting.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Kusler and seconded by Commissioner Wolf. Is there any discussion on that motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, that motion carries. We also have the minutes of the February 12th, 2020 work session. I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Move approval. Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Wolf and seconded by Commissioner Sullivan. Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, that motion carries. Brings us on to item 2, committee reports. I understand that the Age-Friendly Communities Steering Committee has an update that they would like to provide.
Yes, I do. Thank
Please.
you. The steering committee completed, with a lot of help from staff and community members, completed an age-friendly action plan, which has been approved by AARP under a program that is run by AARP and the World Health Organization to certify communities as age-friendly. The action plan was submitted to City Council last night and has been approved and accepted by City Council. So East Lansing is now officially an age-friendly community, which we're very proud of. In addition, Michigan is now an age-friendly state, and Michigan State University has been certified as an age-friendly university under a program that is not run by AARP and the World Health Organization, but is run out of Dublin City College and is one of a limited number of age-friendly universities in the United States. So we got a trifecta here in East Lansing.
Congratulations.
Very nice.
Any questions for Vice Chair Boyle? Thank you for that. We also have an update on the Form-Based Code Committee. The committee met on January 24th, and our next meeting is to be determined. We did tentatively have, just for those of you that didn't get the memo today, had tentatively scheduled a work session for next Wednesday, but that has been canceled. And the reason is because we were hoping to get another committee meeting in prior to that work session to sort of discuss what might be on the agenda of that work session. We're unable to do that. And so we appreciate your flexibility of your schedules, and we might actually take that day, I don't know, to actually meet as a committee in order to move things forward as a work session in the near future. Any questions for those members of the committee that are here? All right. That moves us on to item 3, staff reports. Mr. Haywood.
Thank you. So quite a bit of activity by council since we last met in January. Council action on February 11th, they approved the Oakwood boundary study, which part of that they removed 4 properties, so 328, 334, 340, 404 Evergreen, and the city lot 15 from that district. So that's been finalized, and we can move on. They also approved a modified site plan at 1234 East Grand River for a medical marijuana facility. This was previously approved by council, and they were basically modifying their floor plan to better utilize the interior of the building and prepare for recreational or adult use licensing. They also introduced an ordinance 1483, which is part of the subject, one of the subjects on our agenda tonight for the West Road and Coolidge Road rezoning. Discussion-only meeting on February 18th. They discussed the DDA Evergreen properties and the potential for rezoning, and directed staff to begin the process for that in conjunction with the DDA. Their meeting on February 25th, last night, they approved Ordinance 1462, which amends the East Village District and incorporated all of the recommendations that were forwarded from the Planning Commission, with two changes. One was to lower or remove the first-story clear height for residential uses to be determined by council, and then changed the so there's the requirement for heights heights or stories in the East Village District, and they changed that term from and to or. So it can be either the ultimate height of 140 or basically removed the limitation of 10 stories or 8 stories depending on the category. Sure. So that passed with those two amendments. They deferred the Hub 2 site plan and special use permit back to the Planning Commission. That was essentially based on the amendments that were or were not made to the East Village District. And so the fact that the applicant wanted the opportunity to kind of retool their proposal and bring it back. So the Planning Commission's preference was to refer it back to the Planning Commission to consider any changes. They approved Ordinance 1478, which rezoned 3118 West Road. They also approved the associated site plan for the office development there. They approved Ordinance 1479, which amends the conditional rezoning agreement established by Ordinance 1435 for the Park District Building C, to allow for changes to the site plan. And they also approved Land Use USA as the consulting firm for a housing study. With that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Haywood? I said Commissioner Cahill's first.
Yeah, Dave, you indicated council acted twice on rezoning property along West Road. Did I hear that right?
Well, there's the rezoning for the West Road for the proposal that we'll see tonight.
Okay.
For the Eagle development, and then they approved the rezoning for the West Road office building that Phil Crockett brought in for WREL.
Okay. So what are the zonings now?
Oh, so the office.
Are they for the lot splits as they're presented tonight?
That ordinance was introduced by council, not approved yet.
The lot split, or I'm trying to understand what was rezoned.
The only thing that was rezoned on West Road was for the office building at 3118 West Road.
The other one was introduction.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Of what
we'll see tonight.
Seeing tonight.
Okay. Good. Commissioner Wolf?
Oh.
Yes, one other thing they did that I wanted to highlight, that a couple months ago I mentioned that the Maynard Office Park had completed paving in their long developing office park there, and last night City Council took the final step of accepting those roads into the city public street system. So,
Good point. Vice Chair Boyle.
Yeah, I have one question. Does planning staff have an idea about how long the housing study is going to take? And when it'll get started?
Well, it'll get started. They hope to have the initial phase of their data collection and before the students leave. So that first phase ought to happen quite quickly. And then they hope to have their analysis wrapped up by fall, I think.
Good.
Any other?
Just following up.
Yes, please.
On the rezoning for what's in front of us tonight, maybe it happened while I was out of the country, or I don't remember. What did we recommend to the council on the rezoning?
So that ordinance, we haven't seen that yet. So they just introduced it. We'll see that. I can't remember if it's at our next meeting or I think it might be at our next meeting on the 18th.
I see.
Other question?
Could you clarify the changes that were made to the East Village zoning related to the and/or that you were describing?
Okay, yeah, good. Yeah, that's a tough one. So the East Village standard for height says that the ultimate height says that it has to be no higher than 10 stories and 140 feet. So you can't go above either one of those.
Okay.
They changed that to say or. So you can be, well, so it has to be 10 stories or 140 feet. So you can, I get to choose one or the other.
Okay.
So you could make it 10 stories and 180 feet.
Mhm.
The height
9
limits would not
stories.
apply, or you could make it 140 and maybe 14 stories, or,
Yeah.
yeah.
Huh. Thank you.
Okay. Vice Chair?
Just a question, because I was listening to the meeting about that particular, and my understanding was the B3 is or, not and, for its limitation?
I
Height
don't
limitation.
think that it doesn't have a story limit. It just
But only
says
has a
up to.
height.
It just says
Only
up
has a
to.
height.
Yeah, at that height. Lower, I think it's
It has a
or.
minimum story, yes. Is
Yeah.
it 6?
Or 6 or 8, I think.
I think it's 8.
Depending on if it's a residential.
Depends on the, it depends on the
depends on-
category of what the use is.
It will be. Any other questions for Mr. Haywood? Thank you. That moves us into item 4, Commissioner announcements. And then on to item 5, communications from citizens. This is the time in the meeting when we invite members of the public to come forward and bring forth any matters that are either are or are not on our agenda. Typically, we would ask if you were going to make comments on our public hearings, of which we have 4 this evening, that you would wait until that time on the agenda when that would be brought forward. But if you have other items that either are on our old business or just an item that you'd like to take up with the commission, now would be the time to come forward. I'm seeing no one come forward. So I will continue to report that we did receive a couple of different communications from Mr. David Pearson regarding potential contamination at the existing hub building. I don't know that it would be necessary to go on about that, but that it's his and the consultant's conclusion that the contamination has been mitigated or addressed and that the building itself is safe, or at least safe in that regard. Don't want to cause any public concerns. It just basically he was clarifying that it's known and it's being addressed. All right, then. That'll move us on to our public hearings. The first being a site plan. This is an application from 3400 West Road LLC for the property at 3410 Coolidge Road to allow construction of an office building approximately 23,900 square feet in size to house the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy District offices. Ms. Schmidt.
Thank you. I'm just going to pull this up real quick. Okay. This application is part of a multiple application process, which includes the site plan that's in front of you tonight, a modified site plan application for 3400 West Road, a lot split application, and a rezoning application. Since the proposed site plan is shown partially on a parcel that includes an existing approved site plan for 3400 West Road, 3400 West Road will be required to have a modified site plan approval. The applicant has applied for the modified site plan approval, and you will see that at a future date. The parcel will also need to be split and reconfigured to allow for the proposed building location as it's currently shown on both the existing parcels that are as they exist today. The application will be presented to you later on tonight. Finally, the application is proposing to conditionally rezone the reconfigured parcels to M1 Manufacturing District and B5 Community Retail Business District. The applicant has applied for those rezonings, and as we discussed earlier, that has been introduced at the City Council and will be coming to the Planning Commission in a future date. As Chairperson Bowman had stated, the applicant proposes to build a one-story building with approximately 23,825 square feet of space for Michigan Department of Environmental Great Lakes Energy District offices. The proposed site plan sits on a parcel slightly over 3 acres in size. It's a wooded wetland predominantly through most of the site. As designed, the building is currently expected to hold as many as 80 employees. The floor plan can accommodate future expansions within the building, and the parking has been designed to accommodate that future expansion. Their hours of operations are proposed to be from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. The building was designed to minimize the impact to the wetlands on the site. However, it does impact the wetlands, so they will be meeting with the appropriate agencies to mitigate those impacts and are meeting with them currently. And we'll have to provide documentation that they've met the Commission on the Environment approval prior to moving on with this application. The building, the stormwater retention area was designed to be underneath the parking in the rear of the building. They also are proposed to connect to an existing 12-inch water line on the west side of Coolidge Road and an existing 8-inch sewer line on the east side of Coolidge Road. The proposed project will extend the private drive out to Coolidge Road, providing both access from West Road and Coolidge Road. It provides parking behind the building with some convenient parking and accessible parking on the side of the building. It also provides the required bicycle parking between the parking area and the building. It provides 2 electric vehicle charging stations within both of the tree islands within the parking area. It also provides a 5-foot wide sidewalk along Coolidge Road that will be required to be 8-foot wide, and it also provides a 5-foot wide sidewalk that connects the Coolidge sidewalk to the building. The traffic assessment was reviewed by the Transportation Commission, and the only remark that they had is that they would require that they had the sidewalk along Coolidge Road, the west side of Coolidge Road. There was one requirement that is missing from your report that will be added to your report at the next revision, and there's a requirement that the driveway be set back 10 feet from the property line, and currently the driveway and most of the site is set back 5 feet from the driveway. So the applicant will have to modify the driveway setback some, and I believe there is room to do that without too much manipulation of the project. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions from Ms. Schmidt? Commissioner Wolf?
The driveway out to Coolidge goes through another lot, is that correct?
That's correct.
So the driveway won't belong to them, they'll need an access easement?
Yes,
for
that's
that?
correct.
Okay. And this would be creating a lot, and we've had some experience with this over the last year and a half, it would be creating a lot that would not be eligible for a special use permit if that came up at some time? Because it would not have frontage?
That's correct.
Okay. I understand they don't need it right now. And
Right, that is correct.
probably in those B districts, we don't have that many special use permits?
They're fully aware that that would be the issue, not having frontage.
Commissioner Cahill?
It said that the detention basin would be under the parking lot?
Correct.
How does that work?
That's a good question for the applicant. They can explain
Okay.
that for you.
All right.
Any other questions? Oh, sorry, continue. Please, yes.
Yeah, one issue I have with this is we're reviewing it as though it was B5. It's actually OIP.
Correct.
And I think we should be reviewing under the law as it exists. Not what someone might want it to be or hopes it to be. So I would be interested, of course, the use there that's being proposed here would seem to fit in OIP, I think, wouldn't it?
Correct.
Yeah. So I guess that's not an issue, but if it was B5, could open it up to a lot of other different uses.
And I believe the purpose for changing some of these zoning and lot split, I think I gave a little bit of history more in the lot split application, but originally this area was zoned to OIP, a larger area, because it was anticipated that several of the property owners would get together and develop a large industrial complex. So with large lots, separations between the buildings, and larger setbacks. So the ordinance required larger lot requirements, minimum lot requirements, and larger setbacks. So in previous attempts to develop this property, there was difficulty in doing so. So the applicant is under this process is looking to not only develop this property that's in front of you tonight with the site plan, but also provide 2 additional sites for office type development. And he's willing to provide or offer a conditional rezoning for the M1 and provide conditions that would put any concerns about the additional type uses or the lack of standards that the M1 has over the OIP into that conditional rezoning to make up for that change. Again, the OIP was developed at a time when there was a thought that the city could handle a large complex of industrial type development, but shortly after that happened, the properties to the north couldn't get any development for industrial use, so they rezoned to a B4, which is an office type development. Same with the property to the south. So now all of a sudden you have a much smaller area of property that was really designed as far as the zoning to be developed as a larger group of properties. Now it's a smaller group and it's more difficult to develop as an OIP property because there's not as much accumulated property. So this property has been difficult over the years to develop under the OIP, and not necessarily concerned with the uses as much as just development in general to develop as that whole area is developing. If you look at that area, a lot of the development is office type uses, retail type uses. So the type of uses that they're proposing are pretty much in line with the B5 type uses in the comprehensive plan and what is out there currently.
Okay, I understand we have a little sliver of OIP there.
Right.
Which is in a sea of B4. And so changing it makes sense to me, to make it consistent with everything else. But then why would we take this even smaller sliver right in the middle and make it B5 instead of B4 like everything else around it?
It's a good question.
And why are we analyzing it as B5? Well, I don't think we should be doing B5 or B4 unless it's actually the zoning for the area. But I'm asking why staff would have reviewed it as B5 instead of B4 or OIP.
Thanks. Commissioner Cahill, sounds like Mr. Haywood's got.
Yeah, I can help you with that. So your first question about why we would be reviewing it under B5, it's customary when an applicant has submitted an application to rezone a property to a different district that we make the assumption, and they've asked for that it be assumed that it would be rezoned to B5, so we would develop, or we would do our review as if it were B5. They know that they wouldn't get approval or wouldn't pursue it under its current zoning, so they're kind of asking for us to review it that way. And we've done that in the past on many proposals. And then to answer your question about why we would entertain B5, the master plan designates the property in the C2 future land use category, and specifically states that it's a broad range of commercial uses and is most analogous to B5. So it's kind of in lockstep with our master plan.
I mean, it seems to me that it's the continuation of a trend that away from the idea that office industrial parks are the best way to make, to use any land, that potentially wasteful, as idyllic as they were originally pictured, as sort of drive in the countryside and there's an office or excuse me, a sort of a bench assembly or low-use industrial building, that this probably provides better use, to my way of thinking, better use of the land, and that the trend has been, as Ms. Schmidt has indicated, that sort of it starts to squeeze in on it. Maybe this is the final straw in that particular movement. Please.
Right, and so the 3400 West, that current parcel zoned OIP, can't be split any further under OIP. They've exhausted their minimum lot size. They can't get, if they split it again, they wouldn't have the minimum lot size. So they're kind of stuck with twice as much land than they need in that sense. So they've been trying for many years, in fact, as long as I've been here. I think they've entertained many options and tried to do something with the property and keep running up against this OIP as kind of a barrier to development. And there is developable land there, so it's, I guess, a question for all of us. Is this something we want to pursue and help open up that for development? So that's kind of the question.
Absolutely. Commissioner Wolf.
I don't have any problem with evaluating it based on the proposed zoning. I think that's the right way to do it. But I did want to raise the question that's already been raised about the B4 versus B5. I can see arguments for both of them. The B5, as stated in the master plan, is the closest to the C2?
C2.
C2. But B4 is not drastically different than C2. It has some things in common with it. And the main reason is you just look at the map there and you see a whole sea of B4. And we're going to rezone it for an office building, which should fit in B4. And the obvious thing to do would be make it B4. So I'm not sure I want to immediately assume that B5 is right. What I'd like to ask is, could you put something in an updated staff report showing what the B4 requirements, the zoning analysis, would this building we're talking about tonight on this site work under B4, or is there something?
Yes, absolutely.
About
We
the
can show
setbacks
where
that
it would
prohibit
or
it
would not
or-
work.
I'm not sure which one I feel more strongly about, but it just seems though the zoning map's going to look a little odd when we're done here, putting a B5 in the middle, if it's not even the one that's necessarily required for this project.
Great, we can do that.
Good point. Other questions for Ms. Schmidt or Mr. Haywood? Okay, I see the applicant is here, and I'm sure they're itching to tell us how they're going to cover up this basin and make it all parkable.
Floating parking lot.
There you go.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing us. My name's Paul Gentilozzi, and I'm here with my partner, John Gentilozzi, to talk about 3400 West Road. We've been before you before, a little bit about this parcel on West Road when we were looking at building a doggy daycare about 18 months ago. I think it's important, we wrote you a letter about why we didn't complete that project. One of the things that, having been a developer for 50 years, I don't often walk away from a development project or a tenant. In this case, we weren't sure that we could assure you of the noise quality for our neighbors putting a doggy daycare there. We really agonized over it. So we withdrew the project because I don't want to do anything, having done this 50 years, I don't want to do anything that a municipality doesn't like down the road. We bought this property almost 20 years ago to use the existing building for a business. My office is there. And we knew that it was uniquely OIP. Now, didn't so much matter at the time because our primary desire was to use that building. Nisui was there first. They built the building, and they were a plastics recycling business. They bought scrap plastic and they ground it up in a machine inside the building, and they sold the pellets to be remanufactured. In the last 10 years, we've looked very hard at what to do with 3400 West Road. We have 10 acres, and we have a 25,000-foot building in the middle of the 10-acre parcel. And when we bought it, we had a wetland survey. And we had limited amounts of wetland that we knew that someday we'd have to mitigate or respect. And so we've worked back and forth, and in the last year, we got very serious about redevelopment. In our business, the economy is very cyclical, so we see times when things are good and people are expanding and they buy and build new facilities. A year ago, the state of Michigan, my primary job in life is developing buildings for state government. We have a lot of buildings in the greater Lansing area. At the height, we had over 2 million square feet of office buildings, of which the state leased from us 1.5 million square feet. We've sold some and kept some and developed some more. And when the state of Michigan put out an RFP for a regional office for Eagle, what we all knew before as DEQ, for many years, a new governor, new names. I immediately thought of the land that we have, that we've come to you today for. And it was perfect for what we wanted to sell to Eagle. They're all about caring, maintaining, governing our wetlands. And they hadn't had a new regional office in 25 years. They are in terrible facilities, cramped, condensed, inefficient, and Governor Whitmer decided that that was the first agency she was going to allow to do a proper regional office facility. So we bid this site against 9 other sites in the greater Lansing area. This is a 5-county office. It's been expanded, started out as 3 counties, now 5 counties, has grown in population and grown in size from less than 20,000 feet to the maximum they could grow the agency of just about 24,000 feet. And it has become the focal point for Eagle and what their future will look like. So we spent a long time trying to figure out a building that was efficient for them. And we've come back, after a lot of work, we came back with a very creative structure that brings the outside in and has a lot of facets that were important for the agency to be able to brag about. And we were rolling along just fine, and we got to the wetland issue. Well, Eagle did their own new wetland assessment. We've had 3 previously, and we had boundaries that we could live with. Eagle came along and said, we're going to do our own assessment, of course, and they did, and the boundaries tripled. So usable land mass got much, much smaller. The problem then became that we didn't want to be in the political situation of going to the agency that gave mitigation permits and asking for mitigation. So, after a lot of political wrangling with everybody from the governor's office to the director's office to our office, we decided we had to change our plan and move everything out of the wetland below the lower limit threshold. There's a threshold of 3/10 of 1 acre total mitigation, to which you don't have to mitigate. You file for a permit, and they were great with that. But we did have a lot of indigestion. Their boundaries were much more difficult, and we're sure they were done with a political sensitivity to make it so no one could ever argue that Eagle did us a favor. The opposite side of never getting a favor is there are new rules that are stringent, more stringent than the original rules. But we said, okay, to do that, our existing retention pond for the stormwater system had to be completely dug up. And we had to now build, as my son John will show you in the description, an all-new $500,000 under the parking lot detention program. Now, what we do there, and we've done it in several locations for state buildings around the state, we essentially excavate the site, use a 8-foot diameter?
No, it's about 3 feet in this case.
Well, 3 feet of depth. What are the
3 feet.
pipes?
Oh, the pipes are 3 feet tall.
All right. So we take a big plastic pipe, we fill it full of pervious rocks, we cover it with pervious rocks, and the groundwater goes into this area just like it would a surface detention pond. So all of our pond will be subsurface, and our parking lot will be over that. Now, it's a little bit of a common strategy today, where you, in our case, we tried to put the pond in the wetland. We learned that was a wrong idea, and we mentioned ducks, and that was a wrong idea because they really don't like it when you try to make an area for ducks. Wetlands are to be as they are, not modified, not enhanced, left alone. So that's what we've done with this site. The front door, the view of our building for Eagle, is all of the wetlands and all of the native trees that are there. Anything we take out to build the road, for example, will be replaced with new Michigan trees and new Michigan plantings. So we've been around the block getting to a building that was exactly what Eagle wanted, and I tell you this unabashedly, we've driven the staff crazy, and we've done many meetings, many brainstorms on how to get buildings to fit on this site. We have a 1/4 mile long piece of land that's narrow by proportion. So when we looked at OIP was written as a philosophy for a 50 or 80 acre parcel. All of the neighbors abandoned their OIP zoning, and the only thing I can do now, if I keep it OIP, is build a marijuana grow. Well, I don't want to do that. I do own the office of the Bureau of Marijuana Regulation for the state of Michigan, and they're a great tenant, and we're a great landlord for them. But I don't want to be in the marijuana retail business. I don't want to grow. We've had hundreds of calls because of the OIP zoning, and we could have done a deal that made us a lot of money a long time ago, but that's not the neighbor I want to be. So when I look at Don Maynard's stuff to the north, that wouldn't have been good. When I look at SETSAG, friends of mine, the people who built the new building just to the north of us, that's not what they would have wanted or expected us to do. So we want to be sensitive, and we had to work with a rezoning application because of the wetlands where we could place buildings. We're going to lose from what we thought when we bought it and we had that wetland, we're going to lose about 20,000 square feet of building that we can't develop. And that's okay. I build big buildings and small buildings, and sometimes you just have to do what the community allows you to do. So in looking at B4, B5, we looked at all of those alternatives. And we're 100 yards from other B5 zoning. So it's not like we're trying to pick a high density. This will always be a low density site. But the way the site's configured, we have setback, lot line, road, frontage, all of those issues that had to be considered here because we had this unique kind of bowling alley. And so that's why we came as B5. And the existing building, the existing use that we have that came in under the original OIP, we had to find a use that it could fit under. And to do that, we were more than willing to promise the city that we wouldn't do anything in that zoning that they didn't like. We promised the staff, we'll put in all the restrictions for stuff that you don't want. You know, you don't want a tire recycling building in the middle of this office park that we have, because we're kind of the odd man out there. So I think we've come with a workable, logical situation that answers a down zone from OIP to lesser zonings, allows us to bring the Eagle building into the site and make it fit. And when John gets to his explanation, you'll see we're going to build on the east end of the site. We'll have the potential to build an 8,000 or 10,000 foot building when we had the potential to build a 30,000 foot building before the wetland debacle. And on the West Road frontage, that's another 8,000 or 10,000 building instead of a 20,000 foot building. So it is complex, and I know it's a lot for the board to take in at one time, but we've done a lot of work, and I think we can answer all of your questions. And in the end, I hope you'll agree that this is the right choice for us. So I'll turn this over to the smart guy in our group, and he's got a little presentation he can walk you through. That's you, by the way.
No, that's me. I was going to say I didn't see anyone else here, so I guess.
Sure.
We'll give you, presume that you're smart as well. Commissioner Cahill?
I understand, as I said, that the OIP is no longer appropriate there. It's a little sliver in the sea of B4. But I'm still not understanding why an even smaller sliver should become B5 instead of B4 like the rest of the sea of B4 around it.
Well, the sea of B4 is not really a sea because there's, as I say, a couple hundred yards away. But I think John can actually answer that. He studied with the staff the alternates and the uses, and it became a setback, center of the property, no frontage, all of those components played in to our expectation.
Thank you.
Sorry.
A lot of pressure on one log.
What the? All right.
I think nerves are involved here.
If you'd answer your security question in front of this entire room, I'm sure we could get past this. Will the other user work with this login?
What the heck?
Usually it tells you, doesn't it?
Hey,
There you go.
Sorry about that. All right, let me get this one down.
There we go.
There you go.
Perfect, thank you. So as I get this file open, I can speak a little bit to the rezoning. So we certainly looked at every possible zoning within the community, and we also looked pretty thoroughly through the master plan that we understand is upcoming. And in the master plan, C2 specifically does not allow light industrial. Now, that plan may change over time, but the C3 zoning did include light industrial and did include a number of other things. So our goal was to provide, when the master plan is enacted, our goal is to provide a consistent zoning across the entire section of property. For us, being C2, C3, C2, C2 didn't make a lot of sense. So the move from, and as we looked at the properties that were scheduled for C3, those were all the B5 properties to the south of us. That entire block on the north and south side of Abbey Road, on the east side of West Road there, many of those developments are similar to what we're anticipating for the rest of the parcel. So when we look at, for example, the WREL development that has been approved as a B5 development on that corner, from what we've seen of the site plans, that's a very similar building to what we would anticipate on the West Road portion of the vacant land. And the land use requirements in B5 are certainly different than B4, and they offer us a little bit more flexibility in the amount of ground cover that we can use. Building size will never hit the maximum building size on any of those parcels under either zoning. I'd never say never, but it's unlikely that we would. Additionally, in B4, any building over 25,000 square feet does require a special use permit, and that requirement is not in the B5 zoning. That was, for us, another advantage. And certainly, I don't know if the zoning information has been provided to the commission yet, or if you'll see it perhaps in a future agenda. We make a very detailed case regarding the deficiencies in the OIP zoning, and as well our reasoning for desiring the B5. So if we can carry through with the site plan, certainly I'd be welcome to go forward, and we'll certainly revisit the zoning topic at another meeting, and we can certainly do the analysis between now and then of what we think is possible. But looking just quickly on my phone at the zoning code when this topic came up, B4 may be possible, but as I say, moving forward into the C2 and C3 zonings, we would be in the same situation where 3/4 of the property was zoned one way and one piece of the property is zoned another, because in addition to having the unique zoning, we also possess one of the few light industrial buildings within the city. So keeping that building in the city inventory is something that we really think is important. It's something that we think can be attractive. Not necessarily, we're not looking for a stamping plant. We're looking for a technology company or research use, something like that would fit that space. And there are currently people looking for that type of space, but we wanted to maintain cohesiveness across the parcel. So if that, for the moment, can satisfy your question until we come to a further point where we consider the rezoning application, I'd love to show you what we've got planned for what's in front of you this evening. So obviously, just to give you the overview of where we're at, it's this portion of our site that we're proposing. One of the big selling points with Eagle was the continuation of Coleman Road. Hopefully, it'll be done about the same time we are, or perhaps a little bit sooner. When we deal with an agency like Eagle, we're sensitive to what their mission is. And we feel like the site plan that we've put together provides a building in a nice environment, the natural environment that you would want for this sort of thing. As I say, the building shape is pretty much based on the available land that we have. Oddly enough, that's not a bad idea when you're in that situation. And our wetland plan, as it's being written forward, and I suspect we'll have our permit application in to all parties within the next week or so. Our consultant is just finishing that up. And the second to last comment on there is that once we realized that we needed wetland impacts, that we had wetland impacts on the site, we didn't take a combative approach. We decided that we really wanted to demonstrate how a developer can work cooperatively with Eagle and provide a site that is near and close to wetlands and is still an economically viable proposal. And lastly, on the use of Michigan native plants, as I speak to landscape architects, they will all tell me that at some point palm trees were native to Michigan. So we've sort of set a date 1800s, 1900s for establishing what is and is not a Michigan plant. Just to make that note in case anyone was thinking of questioning it. So obviously you've seen the site plan that you have in front of you. I will note just a couple of things on this drawing. If you see the line that my mouse is sort of hovering over here, this line and its companion there are wetlands where the mouse is right here. So this section here is upland, and then we come back and on the northeast corner of the site there's additional wetlands. So these two hatched areas here are the wetland impacts for the driveway crossing, this one actually being an equalization culvert that covers the flow from the existing swale. We will actually be, of course, under the supervision of the Ingham County Drain Commission, releasing our stormwater through the wetland to carry off into the Moore branch of the Remy-Chandler drain. Test my knowledge on that one. And that's where you'll see the other impact that we have down here in kind of the southwest corner of the site. That's to fit the parking lot in and to get our stormwater discharge structure where we need the water to go. Since we're on the topic of stormwater, here's the thing about subsurface detention. It requires close to 40,000 pounds of plastic to be trucked in from Connecticut. And so we made a very vigorous argument about what was better for the environment, what was better for the long-term health of the building and the sustainability of the building. And it's generally considered that the wetlands take the priority. So we moved the stormwater detention underneath the parking lot, but at the same time we're also investigating other methods of doing it. So in addition to the plastic dome structures, which if you're curious about how these systems work, a company called StormTech and ADS out of Connecticut provide the structures. But we've also looked at actually concrete structures. So there's a local concrete company that does make subsurface systems out of concrete. So for us, it feels a lot better to bury stone and cement and a little bit of rebar than it does to bury plastic. But we still have to do the engineering of the concrete system to see if it's viable. And essentially what happens, it's no different than an open detention pond. Open detention pond, you collect the stormwater from various portions of the site, you bring it into the detention pond, filter it out, and then either it percolates into the ground or you release it into some storm sewer or some other structure. We're doing the same thing. But in order to get the amount of storage volume that you need, and in this case we're talking about 42,000 cubic feet of water for the 100-year storm that we'd have to hold on to. The chambers that you build are actually, not to correct you, but they're actually empty. The reason that you have these plastic chambers is to create void. So you begin by excavating a swimming pool effectively. You line the swimming pool with 40% porous rock, so that means that there's 40% void in the rock, which will be filled with water. On top of that rock, you place a geotextile fabric. On top of the fabric go the domes. On top of the domes go more rock, and then some sand, and then the parking lot. So as a matter of land use, it's a preferable way to do things because you have no land use going to stormwater detention. Now, you certainly can argue that any stormwater pond that you build eventually will become a wetland, and whether that wetland becomes regulated or not is a very hotly contested topic and not one for tonight. But we feel confident enough that we can execute the stormwater storage this way, and we also understand that it's the only way. The feedback that we received from Eagle was pretty straightforward about stormwater detention in wetlands, is that they will not permit that. And so that was simple. That was the end of the discussion. On we went. But it's not an uncommon system. We wouldn't be doing anything that's unusual or revolutionary. It's just a different way to use the land. It's a different way to store your stormwater. So moving on from that, we tried to place the building as well as we could to receive natural light. We've done some light studies on how to position the building, but as I say, the wetlands sort of shaped the building for us. So there wasn't a lot of consideration for that. We use structural insulated panels. SIPs for short, and these are and we'll talk about it a little bit later on, but for us they hold an incredibly high R value, which means our building is better insulated and our building is more airtight and our energy costs are reduced. And when you're paying the utility bill for your tenant, these are things that become very important to you. We use an open structure floor plan, so a lot of times in our buildings you'll see the roof trusses, you'll see the bottom of the roof deck, but it will look very nice. We're not not building barns here. It's a very pleasant space to work in. Obviously, you don't have a choice anymore. It's LED lights or nothing, but we do provide the best lighting control that we can to minimize their usage. Our HVAC system is a little bit unique. Variable refrigerant flow is something that's very common in Europe and in Asia and in historic building restorations. In fact, the GSA requires it. A lot of old courthouses on the East Coast now have VRF systems, and I can explain a little bit more on that later on. A couple unique things at the bottom, obviously the electric car charging, certainly per the East Lansing Code, we're required to have it. I would note something about our placement though. One of the things that we considered when placing the electric car charging was cord hogging. So if you provide only one spot for someone to charge their electric car, when their car is done charging, there it sits unless they move it. So we looked at doing these charging stations in the parking lot island adjacent to the light poles, and they can actually serve either space. So if the one cord isn't available, someone else can plug in and charge. It's a relatively minor thing, but one of the detail things that we looked into, obviously, as we explore something that's new to us, the charging stations. And uniquely in this building, we don't have men's or women's restrooms. We have 2 banks of genderless restrooms. Our opinion on the topic is twofold. Number one, it's not our job to decide where someone goes to the bathroom. And number two, it's actually cheaper for us to end up building individual bathrooms, and it takes up less floor space. Our architect did a fairly involved space and cost study and came to us and said, I think this is a good idea for the building, and we agreed with him, so that's what we're going forward with. To carry on to the floor plan, and you've got this in the elevation in front of you. A couple things to point out here. This center vaulted section is something that we're going to be very proud of and are very proud of the ideas that we're carrying into it. This is sort of the town square of their office. So all the meeting spaces are here, the conference spaces are here. You can see the 2 restroom blocks down in the bottom. And those are trees, and we fully intend to grow trees inside as part of a sort of natural landscape installation on the interior. Certainly everyone has questions about sunlight and things like that, and we feel like we've got some innovative solutions to make the trees grow, or at least a solution to replace the tree every few years. Those are sort of our options with the tree, but we're gonna give it our best. So as you work out to the wings, these are very much standard office spaces. All the WSs are cubicle workstations, and over the cubicle workstations, we do a floating cloud, basically. So rather than having open structure above your head, we bring a sort of a hard ceiling down to 9 feet above the cubicles. That provides the lighting and the ventilation for the people that work in those cubicles, and it makes it feel a little less like you're working in a warehouse. It makes the space a lot more comfortable and a lot warmer. The things that you see here are file cabinets. Eagle, as an agency, travels incredibly heavy. They have records a long, long way back, and they're a little bit slow in digitizing things. So we're storing a lot of files at the moment, but hopefully as things progress for them, those will be digitized and we'll be able to provide home for some more workers there. On the rest of the building, it's all fairly standard office space items. On the elevations, you can see here the exterior elevation. This is the main entrance that faces the parking lot. This is the rear entrance that faces the wetland, and we've got planned a deck with a pergola for the employees to sit there and enjoy their lunch and view the wetland and the deer that we've got crossing the site fairly often, actually. The deer have been sort of squeezed onto us, and I know that this is an interesting topic at the moment in East Lansing, and we'll add our 2 cents to say we like our deer, and they're just fine.
There won't be any deer blinds on our land.
Yeah, no, we've had an alarming number of offers to hunt from our land, and we've rejected them just out of consideration for the deer. On this elevation, you'll see some of the finish examples from a previous building that we did, the Unemployment Insurance Agency call center and help desk on Jolly Cedar in Lansing. And what we have on the exterior is an aluminum metal panel. It's essentially a rain screen system. So these panels are fabricated from aluminum sheet and then hung onto the wall. Below that is the type of stone that we envision using. Now the colors may change or the composition of the panel may change, but this is the type of building we're looking for, a modern feel. without being too cold. The stone, we feel, really gives it warmth, and certainly I would, hopefully none of us ever have to visit the unemployment agency help desk, but certainly if you are in that area of town, I'd encourage you to have a look. So a little bit that we want to talk about the sustainability of the building and a few things that we've looked into that we really feel will help this. It's a summer build, so we reduce temporary heat. Our last 3 buildings have all been winter projects, and so we're used to propane and torpedo heaters, and they're an unnecessary cost, and it's burning a lot of propane for no good reason. The less on-site waste is something that I would definitely want to point you to. The SIPS panels show up in anywhere from 8 feet wide by 24 feet long to 8 feet by kind of 16, the interior height of the building. And they're prefabricated, so the windows are cut out, the headers are installed, the splines which connect the panels are prefabricated. So we're not going to have a dumpster full of 2x4 cutoffs. We're not going to have a dumpster full of metal studs. Our dumpster waste on these projects is very, very little. And it's an interesting way to look at it, but these things really are reducing the amount of material that we're putting into landfills. And it's the same with the drywall. We use less gypboard than a traditional hard ceiling. We don't use acoustical tiles. We're finishing the inside of the SIP panel, and that reduces quite a lot of the waste that you would normally see from one of these buildings. The HVAC system is going to use smaller ductwork, less of it, and then smaller pipe diameters feeding it. So we really do use less metal in our building. We use less wood in our buildings. And the SIP panel themselves, you know, they're basically farmed from aspen trees and some of the other trees, and the foam that's within them is recycled at the plant level. So the waste from building this building is very minimal. So if you've not seen what a SIP panel is, I do provide a small section view. So the finished floor would be here. You've got a treated sill plate, some sealant, and then the panel itself, which is OSB on each side, and anywhere between 4 to 16 inches of foam in between. Now, all of that is wonderful, especially when you look at the whole wall R value. And I didn't just make these up. This was testing done at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and there are a number of other SIPS tests that have been performed that came up with similar results. So our whole wall R value ends up almost at 30, which if you've ever tried to insulate your house, you'll appreciate is an impressive value. Also, the air infiltration test, and this is a plus and a minus when you're building this type of building. No fresh air is going to leak in, which is great, but no fresh air is going to leak in. So we do have other methods. We pull in air from the outside, we run it through an energy recovery ventilator, and introduce that into the rest of the space. And what that really means is that we're not losing conditioned air to the outside. So if we spend the energy to make heat, we're going to keep that heat. We're not going to let it trail off out of the building. The VRF system, variable refrigerant flow, has a lot of energy saving ability, and really the way to think of it is, if you're familiar with most commercial buildings, you have an enormous rooftop air conditioner heater unit. In that unit, a very large compressor and an even larger fan. And when you really break down the energy usage by those systems, the fan energy is immense. Because as you imagine, if you're pushing that air through 10 or 15,000 square feet, you've got to really get it going to move it 200 or 300 feet down the duct system. What the VRF system does is separates those two functions. The compressors exist outside, and they're controlled. So in a normal rooftop unit, when you turn the air conditioning on, that compressor ramps up to 100% and stays there until it is no longer needed. In a VRF system, we're able to control the compressors so that they use a lower energy level, perhaps for longer, but they don't use near the electricity. An interesting thing about this is that we don't need natural gas in that building. And there are a number of communities, largely in California, I'll admit, that have actually banned natural gas, Berkeley being one of them, have actually banned natural gas from being installed in buildings. So you can no longer use a natural gas heater or anything like that. The neat thing for us, because we're all electric, we don't have the ability to install solar panels. From an economic perspective, it's not viable. We're not going to put a wind farm on our building. But as the energy grid greens up, As the energy grid relies more on solar or more on wind, our building is the direct beneficiary of that, because all of our utilities, our electric utilities, are then able to draw from that grid without us installing those things. There are a number of other neat VRF things that believe me, could go on for a long time. We're true believers in the technology, and we believe it has a lot of potential for us. So again, just some design reference from the other building, just to give you an idea of the exterior. And a little bit, this is the interior of the UIA space. And this section on the left is actually the public-facing portion. So if you do have a problem, you come in there and get your problem resolved. And we were very conscientious about how we designed that, because if you've come to that office, there's a good chance that you're not very happy. So to put you in a space that makes you less happy doesn't help anyone. And we think of the Eagle building in the same way. We want people to come to work and work in a place that they're proud of, and work in a place that they're happy to be, and doesn't just feel like a cube farm. So all of that said, I'm glad to answer any questions you may have on the site plan, and I'm sure we'll be back to the lot split application here shortly.
Questions for either Mr. Gentilozzi or Mr. Gentilozzi?
I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
Commissioner Cahill?
I'm going back to the B4,
You bet.
B5 again. Could you state simply why you would need B5 instead of B4?
Can I state simply? No, it's a multitude of reasons, really. Number one, the special use permit requirement. Number two, the future use as C3 in the master plan, and having the entire property be zoned to C3 because it allows the light industrial that's currently there. Amongst some of the land use restrictions obviously play a role in it. It's unlikely that we hit the target with B4 land use restrictions, which I believe are 40 or 60% coverage.
As we reviewed it, because we're stuck with the road location, the private drive on the north edge of our lot line, under B4, it changes completely the setback requirements from lot line to road of the current, and from building to road. All of the configurations of where we are on setbacks and lot lines under B4 made virtually the development of the rest of the site more than difficult and more than inefficient. We're not trying to take advantage of anything in B5, but with the encumbrances that we have of the use of the existing building and the available developable parcels, B5 simply was the only thing that worked for us to try to get. We're putting in the site plan, we're having to put two parking lots together to get the building with the wetland line. If we were B4, we can't do that. We can't build the building without major mitigation, because we have to separate parking lots by setback requirements. That was, I think, primary in my mind.
Certainly that's part of it. And really, we're not, as we say, we're not an island of B5 necessarily, and certainly the B5 requirements permit some different things. We don't know what the future holds for that parcel, but as we envision the future development that we would pursue there, it seemed to fit better within B5. As I say, similar to the properties that you see south of Abbey Road. We see more of that than we do necessarily what's on the Maynard Park.
The corner of Abbey and West Road is applicant for B5. So it is, I guess that might be 200 yards away. And the I building is B5.
Yeah, certainly the I building on the corner of Coolidge and Abbey is also B5.
So we can stand on our land and look at lots of B5.
Yeah, just for way of argument, and I don't want to by any means cut discussion short. If we're presuming that we're going to offer you the courtesy of reviewing it under potential B5, with
Right.
the understanding that it might not be that, right,
Yeah.
as is customary, the discussion of appropriate zoning is probably best
For the next.
reserved for the
for
meeting
this-
at which that is
Sure.
actually going to be proposed. Because for the we don't have the graphics that might demonstrate the potential coordination with
The new zone.
exactly,
Yeah.
the C2 and C3 zones. And so
Sure.
please continue to ask the questions, Commissioner Cahill, but know that that ultimately those are going to be addressed at a later meeting when we've got better information about specific zoning issues as opposed to site plan issues. So I don't want to cut it short, but we do know that we're going to see this again
You're going to revisit.
2-3 weeks from now,
Yeah,
4 weeks from now.
certainly, very soon. And certainly at that time, I would encourage everyone to read the zoning narrative that we provided with our application.
Commissioner,
No, it's-
whoops, yeah, just a second. Yeah, please continue, Commissioner Cahill.
Just to clarify, under the master plan, this would be in the C2 area, right?
That is correct. Unfortunately, as the master plan shows, C2 does not include light industrial. And there are a number of other uses that would be beneficial for the property or reasonable for the property that are included in C3, which is why we aimed toward B5, because the B5 properties to our south are all scheduled to be C3.
See, we have a light industrial building on the site now that was in on the OIP. So to convert it to a B4 kind of use is impossible.
The building you're talking about is the one
Existing site.
To the west.
Just to the left of this, yes.
by the West Road.
That's
Well,
right.
no, it's in the middle of the site.
Its address is West Road, though.
Yeah. It's 3400 West Road. In its parking lot, well, you see the parking
Right
lot
there.
directly adjacent. Yeah,
Right
it's-
there.
The two buildings abut each other in the middle of the parcel.
And we'll see some more of
Right.
that definition within the lot split application as well.
Yeah.
Right, but you're going for a different zoning for that part of the
Yes,
property.
yes, we are.
There you're asking for an M1.
Yes, we are.
Yes.
Okay.
Which we believe would be converted to C3 with the remaining parcels once the master plan was enacted.
Yes.
Because that building would fit under the uses provided with C3.
Okay.
And I realize,
But right now, that would be C2 also.
as planned, yes, but it's not a conforming use within
Right.
C2 as currently constructed within the master plan.
I understand. Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Cahill. Commissioner Wolf?
Yeah, two things. First, I wanted to add that the thing I asked Darcy for earlier will be presented to us at the next meeting. So we'll see the B4 versus B5 analysis, and I think it'll be clear, or at least that portion of it. So if we're through with the zoning, my second point is on something else. But first, a question, is this Eagle office something that serves the public?
Yes, the public comes there. Hearings, appeals, any function that Eagle does in the 5-county area is
Okay,
done at this location.
and so you're planning to have two means of access to this building. It's going to have a new road driveway
Yes.
out to Coolidge, and then it will also be connected to the driveway you already have from West Road.
That is correct, yes.
And what I wanted to point out is that for last 10 years or more, as far as I know, on your West Road driveway, you have a sign that says private property, no trespassing. Anyone who would go to drive in there heading for Eagle is going to see that sign. And I understand why you have that for the racing facility, and that was the only thing on the site, and you don't want people coming in, curiosity seekers and whatever.
Sure.
But are you planning to continue that, or?
No, I
No.
promise we'll take it down.
No, sir.
Okay.
And we have a gate on that drive.
Yeah.
And we'll remove that.
Yep.
So the intention, actually the advantage here, the address of Eagle will be on Coolidge, 3401. That's their,
Right.
that's where their sign
So
is.
someone who's going to come there is going to be looking for that address.
Yes.
Probably won't head up West Road.
When we discussed giving them two means of egress, it really was because of the new underpass.
Yeah.
And being there every day at 5 o'clock, I know the problems of Lake Lansing Road traffic. It is horrendous. At the stop sign in front of the Burger King, it's 20 minutes. So now with the new exit path, we didn't want to dump all of the cars. If 80 people leave the building at 5 o'clock, we didn't want to dump all that traffic just on Coolidge. So we made the concession to allow egress traffic both directions. It makes no sense for anybody to come into their site from West Road?
If they're coming from that direction, it might.
From the north, they might.
We did find in the traffic study, based on the analysis of Fleece and Vanderbrink, there was very limited traffic through the West Road side. Now, obviously, computer programs can only determine human intent so much,
Yeah.
and we may find that that picks up as we go forward. But certainly, the primary means we believe will be from Coolidge, but it will be available to travel either way, and certainly that was. When the original Nisui site plan was approved, that was something that the city had considered at that time, and in fact, required Nisui at that time to provide that drive to continue for any future development.
Right, as you can see, that driveway was intended to go all the way across the site.
Right.
And it would have been easier just to stay on the north side of the lot line, and it would have been a more efficient land use. But the problem was where the wetland actually is and where the drive, so we went the expensive route because we're running utilities under that road. We went the expensive route to curve it because it was the right thing to do in consideration of the wetlands.
It reduces the wetland impact
Yes.
almost 3/4 of an acre, which was obviously a benefit to us. And certainly if you're going to receive an Eagle permit, you will find that the rules are avoid, limit, mitigate. Avoid the wetland entirely, limit your incursion, or mitigate your impact. So that was in the early meetings as we showed the driveway basically running right through the northern property line. They said, hold on. You certainly can move that a little bit and limit your impact. And so we did go ahead and do that.
And we, from the very beginning of this concept, we've been thoughtful in our development process, really under the orders of the director of the agency and of the governor. This will be, when completed, the most sustainable office building that the state of Michigan occupies. I have a lot of them. Our operating expenses here will be 25% less public utilities used than any other building that the state occupies. In many cases, 40%. The envelope of the building will hold heat better, hold cooling better, and be a better work environment. So this was a beta test for this agency, and as we've proceeded with buildings of this size with the state of Michigan, every time we build a better envelope, we build a better human environment inside. When we look at 80 people in workstations, everyone will have at least a 270-degree view with a window. First time ever. There are a lot of state employees who don't even have a window. Everybody has a lot of windows here. And we did it in a way that was environmentally sensitive for heat loss and heat gain. So it's been, and I know it's hard, you folks get to see us for a half an hour. And we've spent a lot of time.
More or less.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah.
So far.
You wish less, but we've spent a lot of time with your staff trying to give them as much exposure into what and why we're doing this and working out the best path to get there. So we hope there's nothing capricious in our request. We've tried to be real thoughtful about it.
Thank you.
All right.
Other questions for the applicant? All right, then. I think we've got some directives for staff. Thank you.
Okay.
This is a public hearing, and so I would take this opportunity to invite any members of the public who would like to make a comment on this proposal to come forward. If you'd like to make a comment on this project, I thought as much. Thank you. And I'm seeing no one come forward, so we'll close the public hearing, return this to council, or to the commission. We have a couple of directives or requests of staff. Any others that any members of the commission would like to make at this time, or questions for the applicant? Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That'll move us on to item 6B. This is an application for 3400 West Road LLC for the properties at 3400 West Road and 3401 Coolidge Road to split each lot into two separate lots. Ms. Schmidt.
Start over my presentation.
Do that. I said hour and a half. Hour and a half. First.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry about that. Lost my Granicus here. Okay.
One addendum I forgot. Our total construction time will be 6 months, start to finish.
Okay,
So
Okay.
Much quicker process.
thanks.
So this application is the existing 2 parcels together equal approximately 9.91 acres. They're proposing to split it into 4 parcels, parcels A, B, C, and D. The largest of the 2 parcels that exist currently are 6.2 acres in size. It has a 330 feet of frontage and direct access to West Road. It also has an existing building used for rocket sports racing, which is also located nearly at the center of the parcel, as we discussed with the site plan. The smaller parcel is approximately 3.71 acres and has 330 feet of frontage on and directly has access to Coolidge Road. The lot split is proposed for both short-term and long-term development. In the short term, the applicant is proposing to build the 1-story building that we just discussed on proposed parcel C that's shown on the monitor. The long-term goal is to provide 2 additional developable lots consistent with the development to the north and south of the site. The lot split proposal that increases the number of buildable lots must be reviewed by the Planning Commission and approved by City Council. The lot split is consistent with the City of East Lansing Code. If the lot split is consistent with the subdivision regulations, the Michigan Subdivision Control Act of 1967, the master plan, and if it is reasonably compatible with the surrounding neighborhood in terms of preserving population density, patterns, traffic safety, privacy, open space, and property values, the Planning Commission shall recommend approval of the application. Staff has provided within your staff report an analysis of these particular analysis requirements. I would be happy to discuss or answer any questions for that report.
Any questions for Ms. Schmidt? Commissioner Wolf?
Yeah, I had a question about the terminology on here on page 3. Well, and I mean, it occurs throughout here, but it's most noticeable on page 3, I guess, where you're showing the standards for the different zones. And it refers repeatedly to lot frontage.
Yes.
Parcels B and C technically don't have what most people would call frontage on the street. Do we define frontage for a lot that's not actually along the road?
Frontage would be anything on a private drive or street. So, and frontage would be the access point in the front of the building. So it would be the width of the parcel that fronts a driveway or a private street.
Okay, but they don't front private streets either. It seems like the term should be width, minimum lot width, and so we don't use that term, or?
No, it would be lot frontage.
Okay, I guess I still don't understand about the private street, but.
That's how it's defined in our code.
No, I meant as it applies on this site, because there won't be, like on parcel C, there will be no private street that's 506 feet long. to get that frontage number. It's shown under the B5, well, actually, it's shown at the top table under parcel C.
It would be right here. This would be the frontage right here.
Sorry, I can't see where you're.
Turn around.
My mouse is
It's
right.
better behind you.
You see it? This would be the frontage.
Oh, okay, I see.
And
So
this,
it gets kind of completely turned around for those.
right, for the
All
two
right.
center parcels. And then
I
these two
see.
parcels would front on Coolidge and West.
So I mean, I was thinking of that as a driveway, but you're saying that is the
Right.
private street in this case. Most people would look at that and call it the driveway. but-
Right, and in our code, if it doesn't front on a street or road or street, it states that the frontage would be a private road or driveway.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Good question. Other questions for Ms. Schmidt? All right, thank you. I see the applicant is here. I have a question. No, that's fine.
We didn't leave. I'm glad to answer any questions that you may have about our intentions, reasons for the dimensions, shape, anything.
Anything but zoning.
I'll talk zoning all night. I feel like you may.
No, you will not.
I'll last longer than you.
Commissioner Cahill, please.
Are there two drives on this property? On
No,
both sides, or?
No, unfortunately, what our surveyor has shown there is the, I don't know that driveway is the right word for it, but it's just an access to the parking. Let me bring back the Google map.
The new road, the new driveway, is built in conformance with your road standards. And when we went through the process of understanding how to do this, we originally had the concept of making a condominium. And then we had 4 condominium lots and a private drive. And now, the problem gets to the existing Rocket Sports building, where we don't have enough room to make a private drive conform with your street requirements. Otherwise, we would have built a street there.
So what you're seeing in that survey is actually this space right here.
Yeah.
But this is the intended private drive here. And then sort of wandering across the crossing would be right about here. And then we would exit onto Coolidge. Our center line of drive is directly in front of the manhole cover that's in just about this area, to give you some reference.
So the curb requirements and the width requirements, where that road passes just north of the building, right there, we couldn't build a city street there. And we couldn't get in conformance, like our neighbor, his office park is in conformance 100%. When Nisui built the building, the city standards were different. So that's why it's in non-conformance.
I would also add that Nisui insisted that the entrance of the building face south, which those amongst you may be wondering why you would put a 280-foot building on the 330-foot width of the site. The building had to face the south.
For feng shui.
Feng shui.
Yeah.
I wish I was joking. Yeah.
We asked them. So every tenant, or every lot will have an irrevocable permanent ingress-egress easement onto the private drive.
Thanks.
And every lot will own a portion of the drive as
Yes,
well.
yes.
Other questions for the applicant? Commissioner Sullivan?
Yeah, so just looking at parcel D, and to me, to my eyes, it looks like it's predominantly wetland. Could you give me an example of something that could be built there that you would envision potentially one
Sure.
day being built?
Oh,
there?
absolutely. We believe, just on preliminary analysis, once we found the wetland shape, we looked at how much parking you could get in there and sort of the type of building that you could get. We think 8,000 square feet or so spread across 2 floors, professional office type, doctors, lawyers, dentists, that sort of thing. Again, not financial planners, something of that nature, professional services, let's say. We think we can get a reasonably sized building and a parking lot. And we also do, of course, have the ability to go back to Eagle and ask for a wetland permit. And we may do that specifically just to sort of square up the buildable land that we've got there. Wetland determinations are a funny thing. You'll find that the edge of your wetland is right about where you quit mowing in a lot of cases. And well, on a golf course or a subdivision that may have 100 acres to deal with, losing a couple thousand square feet from a wetland delineation line moving one way or the other is not a big deal. When you've got 3/4 of an acre or something like that, you'll find that you're interested in every single inch that you could get back out of that determination. So we did do the analysis and believe there's a viable building that can go there.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for the applicant? All right, then, thanks. If you'd stick close.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Oh, no, nope.
No, question, I just need to leave.
Oh, okay. Then
Permission.
you'll be excused. Thanks for letting me know. Thanks for letting us know. At this time, I'd like to open up the public hearing for this particular application and invite members of the public who are in attendance and wish to make a comment on this application to come forward. Seeing no one, then we'll close the public hearing and return it back to the commission. Your pleasure. Any directives for staff or additional questions for the applicant? Commissioner Wolf.
Yeah, a question for Darcy on the staff report. On page 3 and continuing to page 4, at the bottom of page 3, there's a paragraph describing the M1 district that we're proposing for parcel B. And it primarily runs through the permitted uses in the M1 district. And I believe it leaves out the main permitted use that would apply to the 3GT racing, rocket sports. Let's see. In M1, it seems to me the closest one is public garage, motor vehicle repair shop, automobile paint and bump shop, or car washing establishment. That's the one that's automotive related, and it's not in the list there, and I'm thinking you ought to add that there.
Very good, I'll add that.
I'm not sure if their operation would also possibly fall under light manufacturing. That's listed in M1, but I think is also, I couldn't find it in the list in that paragraph.
Yeah, I'll add that. Good point.
Except if I can say that that's a conditional rezoning request, so those conditions have to be voluntarily offered by the applicant, so we can't just add that to their list that are proposed. That has to essentially come from them.
No, this is just in the report, saying what generally.
It's just a description of the
Yeah,
M1
generally,
district.
yeah.
I thought you were talking about the.
Yeah, these
We
are
haven't
just
seen
general.
their
Oh, okay.
request yet. We don't have that.
Yep,
in
these
front
are
of us.
just general
I just wanted to make
requirements.
sure.
Yeah.
No, we can add
I'm
that.
pretty sure their request will include one of those, because otherwise it would not apply.
Any other directives or requests of staff? Okay. Commissioner Cahill.
Just one, just like on the last one, I would like to see analysis under B4 also.
Of the table that, on, say,
Right.
page 3.
Very good,
The
yep,
tables, yeah.
we can do that. Good
And
idea.
Vice Chair Boyle?
Well, I just have a timing question. Since I understand we're going to get a zoning application here at some point?
Yes,
Rezoning,
that's-
yes? Can this be timed so that we at least have the information from the zoning application before the plans actually come back for our review determination?
Yeah, I think both of these items will be on the March 18th agenda.
Both of the two we're considering tonight?
Yeah, the lot split, the site plan for Eagle, and the rezoning.
So all three of those.
Yeah,
So
All
the-
three.
The rezoning would be new at that meeting.
correct. It'd be a public hearing at that point.
All right.
That's a good point.
Thank you.
Any other requests of staff? Okay, we'll see you on March 18th then. Thank you. It moves us on to item 6C, a special use permit. This is an application for a special use permit from Gateway of East Lansing LLC for the property at 300 West Grand River Avenue to convert first-floor retail space to a fitness center for residents and non-residents of 300 West Grand River Avenue. Mr. Parcell?
Good evening.
Good evening.
So we have a special use permit application here for 1,548 square feet of the vacant retail space on the ground floor of 300 West Grand River. It's the space behind the Big B if you're looking at it from the street, and it's fronting on Delta Drive, I believe. The applicant has dropped off building permit plans starting in November. We looked through the myriad of modified SUPs and SUPs that have been going on for this property, some of which are for the residential component and for the drive-through at the Big B. Staff determined that because this is a recreational use, as we defined it for the fitness center, it will require a special use permit to operate as such in this building, which is what the request is for here. Some of you may remember there's a relatively similar request we had for the 500, 550 Michigan apartment buildings as well, where they did something relatively similar. Ultimately, the difference is, just to alleviate a couple things that were brought up by the applicant, for the B1 zoning district where they mentioned that that's a use allowed by right for recreational, the difference here in B2 is that this is not an office building, and it doesn't take up, or it does take up less than 25% of the total floor area, but they're intending to have the use operate as its own functional type of gym facility. They indicate that it's for the residents of the building that live there at 300 West Grand River and for, I believe, 6 other DTN managed properties nearby. So it seems like some communal gym for the apartment management company itself. Other than that, for this application, I'm open for questions.
Questions for Mr. Parcell? Vice Chair Boyle?
Are we modifying the special use permit that they already have, or is this a distinct?
This is distinct.
Okay, Commissioner Wolf.
I have some questions about the parking numbers.
I just saw that. So
Bottom of page 5.
Yep, this was edited after. There's supposed to be 2 special use permit things coming in tonight at once for the same property. So we did the initial parking table to reflect both of them at the same time to kind of avoid confusion, and then one got postponed, and now this one came here. So I think I missed the 50% reduction. It should actually be 27-ish. I can't do
It should be half of 58.5?
Yeah.
So 29 or 30, depending on whether you round it up or...
Should be down a couple more spaces. There were a few other, there was another section there what the other SUP relates to for 4 efficiency apartments or 6 efficiency apartments, and that number was initially in here. So I took that out to...
So my first question is, the 39 units that it refers to are the upper floor units that are there already?
Existing units currently, yes.
Okay, it doesn't include that other one?
Nope, that wasn't here initially, but once we found that was postponed, we took it out, and it didn't update in my formula.
Okay. And so depending on which way you round that, it's
2 or 3 less, yeah.
2 or 3 spaces fewer.
Yep, a fitness center requires more intensive parking requirements than retail use would. I think a retail is 1 per 300 square feet, and a fitness center is 5 per 1,000.
So that would drop, let's say it would drop to 60, or no, to, all right. This is confusing. If you add it up right now, if you add up the numbers that are in the table, what would be required would be 73. In the final line of the table, you're doing a subtraction, right?
Yeah.
But to figure out what our code requires, you shouldn't do the subtraction at that point, right? If you apply our parking standards, you would come up with 73.
Okay, yeah.
Right, for the site that are required.
I believe so, yeah.
and then they're agreeing to put in 14 moped spots, that would satisfy 3 of those. But the point I'm getting at is, if you go on to the next table on the next page, the zoning analysis,
Yeah.
especially there, it stands out. If you look at the parking spaces minimum required,
Mm-hmm.
and it says 70, I would argue that's not correct. It should have said 73 there.
Okay.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the moped, motorcycle, none is correct. None are required.
Okay.
But then the 14 spaces they're going to provide for those are going to count as if they were
Yeah.
3 car spaces.
Okay.
So if you add those to the 62, you would come up with 65 equivalent that they're providing.
Okay.
And they would still be,
Math.
they would still be 8 short
Yeah.
in that case.
Yes. Okay. I follow you now.
Okay. And then I actually have another question about the parking, and that is, it's not mentioned in the report. This came up when we considered this site before, which is that their underground parking, which is a very substantial amount of it, I can't remember if it's 50% or more, is accessible only to the residents. So in a sense, it doesn't make sense to, that should be reported separately, I think.
Okay.
I'd like to see those numbers here as to which parking spaces are accessible to only residents and which ones are accessible to the public.
Okay. Yeah, the applicant should be able to more directly answer who has access to what there on site, and then we can take a look at that.
I've actually got a related question.
Yes.
And if I'm understanding the table on page 5 correctly, you're basically saying that, the apartments require a certain number of spaces and so on and so on and so on. But for the fitness center, would it not be inappropriate to suggest that the people using the fitness center are likely to be residents as well? Or potentially, at least some of them? Or if not, residents of the apartment, nearby apartments who, after all, are presumably seeking exercise anyway,
Yeah.
and that maybe the count of 10 is higher than it needs to be, maybe significantly so. So basically
Yeah.
saying that you might require less than what you're currently, rather than 73, maybe it's as little as 68, or don't
Yeah.
know, right? I'm just thinking that you're basically saying you need a parking space for a tenant and a parking space to use the facility, but they're
Yeah.
actually one person using both of that space.
Throughout our conversations, the applicant has changed to being for that building only, and then changed to being for surrounding buildings. I took it as face value on the code.
Yeah, so
Assuming, knowing myself in college, I would have driven if it was only a couple blocks and it was 4 degrees out. But I just took it as face value for this. If any parking waiver or any recalculation could be considered, we can take a look at it in
take the
between
escalator
this.
so we can get to the stair machine.
Yeah. Yep. But especially because the use for the special use permit is being for a fitness center in and of itself, I wanted to be as judicious with the parking calculation.
That's not unfair, and it's it's above board, right? So if you're hitting a little high, that seems like it's acceptable. Other questions for Mr. Parcell? Commissioner Cahill.
I had one. There was a similar application a while back to put a gym into the ground floor on Michigan Avenue. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay. And I remember there was a problem with that, and it was rejected by us. Don't we have the same problem here?
It's, for all intents and purposes, relatively the same type of application. It's a mixed-use building in the B2 district who is putting in a residential fitness center. That one stated that it was for the general public as well. This one is, in its current iteration, I believe, for DTN, residents of DTN managed apartment buildings. There's been discussion with DTN about it being open to other people to buy passes, but I'm taking it as what they said here as being for DTN managed residents.
My recollection with the other proposal was that it needed to be open to the public.
Yeah.
And that I think a large part of the feeling was it couldn't realistically be open to the public.
Yes, I don't remember the square footage of that one, but I think this one might be a little bit larger. It's generally, I mean, they were both of the applications were for fitness centers, though.
Okay. Well, I would be interested in information between the two for the purpose of being consistent.
No problem.
Vice Chair Boyle?
Yeah, what did happen at council level with the fitness center request? Because we recommended against it, but what did council do?
I think they also.
It was
Was it
either
denied?
denied or they withdrew before denial. I can't
Okay.
remember.
I don't think it's certainly not used that way.
It was not
Yeah, it's
approved
empty, isn't it?
to operate as such.
So I thought,
I was just trying to check the zoning to see if there's a difference, but it looks like it's the same zoning. I think.
They're both B2. Yeah.
Okay.
Up, down, or up Michigan and further on Grand River that way. Yeah. Both B2.
Commissioner Wolf?
And just, since nobody's actually said it, the issue there was that when they put multiple family housing in a B2 district, the general requirement of the city is that the ground floor has to be, I think the word is primarily, commercial uses. And since this appears to be an amenity for the apartment dwellers rather than what would be considered a traditional commercial use, it might not satisfy that requirement of their special use permit.
Yeah,
That was
the verbiage of the approval for both special use permits was a little different. One said retail, and this one says non-residential. So I would interpret that as you will, but essentially, yes, that is correct.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yeah, didn't the Graduate Hotel do something similar?
Let me think. Oh,
They had first floor retail space that was converted to a fitness center.
Yes, but different district. It's a B3 district.
Okay.
And that was part of, I mean, that was strictly part of the hotel use.
And the hotel by
As-
definition is a commercial use.
As part of that special use permit. And yeah.
And to start with, because they were not a multiple family use within the business district, so it would not have applied, the same rule would not have applied.
And I think perhaps, as you pointed out, that might hinge on what the interpretation of primarily is. Clearly, the coffee shop is there, and I don't know, do you go by square footage or volume of use or what? But it's a good point.
Some sort.
Yeah. Other questions for
447.
Mr. Parcell? Thank you.
Yeah, no
I
problem.
presume the applicants are, because I know that our final applicant is not either of the two of you. If you've got anything you'd like to add, we'd love to hear it. Thank you.
Yes, we're here.
Welcome.
We've been listening to you. I'm Chuck Holman. I'm Vice President of Construction and Development for DTN. I have a colleague, Greg Sislo, who's been working on this project. Yes, we'd like to address some of the concerns that came about.
Yes, please do. Just so we can get the spelling of your name, would you fill out a card before you leave? In the box.
Oh,
Right there.
yes,
Yeah,
I'd be
please
happy to
continue,
do
but
that.
just, we'd like to get that for the record. Thanks.
Okay.
And it's Holman?
Yes.
Okay,
Holman.
terrific. Thank you.
Yes. You brought up several concerns. I just wanted to sort of go back a little bit on the history. This building was built several years ago. The commercial space on the ground floor has been unoccupied until, well, this year. Bigby's, we submitted plans to the building department, got a building permit. We built Bigby's, and they occupied right at the first of the year. We still have the 1,600 square feet that we're talking about here unoccupied. We also have similar square footage across drive aisle that's been unoccupied for that period of time. Obviously, we don't like to have unoccupied space downtown East Lansing. It's not good for us, certainly not good for East Lansing either. So anyway, we got the Big B portion under construction, and we thought, what could we do with the back 1,600 square feet? We very much would prefer to have a non-related entity occupy that space. But if one comes along, we're happy to put them in the space. But to put a fitness center in here, it doesn't take a lot of internal construction. Basically, you put a floor down, put some lights in, put some fitness equipment in, and people are able to use the space. We submitted the plans that we had developed for a building permit back in November. After some period of time, we contacted the building department, the planning department, and they told us that we would have to go through an SUP amendment process, which surprised us. We didn't realize that was the case. At the time, we weren't really given any specific reason why we couldn't do this without going through an SUP amendment process. I learned when we got the package that you received, it has something to do with being recreational in nature. We thought that the current zoning allowed for personal service businesses in a building, in an office building. Well, I heard that this isn't an office building, but it's a mixed-use building, which means it has residential and other uses, as in businesses, provided that such businesses shall not occupy more than 25%. They may include barbershop, hairstylist, beauty salon, spa, shoe, leather, repair, tailor, seamstress, other uses, including an exercise or fitness center. So we assumed that we were following the zoning that's allowed for the building. And when we had some conversations with the planning department, they mentioned the project that you mentioned earlier that was denied, that they were planning on using it strictly for that facility. And so we considered that, and although we hadn't initially, as you mentioned earlier, that planned it for more than the residents at 300 grand, we have many properties in East Lansing, many properties for many years. And this would be a facility that residents from those properties could also use this facility. And it would be a revenue producing opportunity for DTN, because we would provide memberships to those residents to use this facility. So we thought we were in alignment with the requirements for the building. As far as parking is concerned, there was a concern about parking. We actually own the building across the street, 270 grand, and that has about 40 parking spaces there that they would be allowed to use. Plus, the residents from our other properties would be able to use the parking structure underneath our building. So we didn't see parking as an issue for using the 1,600 square feet for a fitness facility for multiple properties that we own in the East Lansing market. So we felt like everything was being done in a manner that would allow this 1,600 square feet be used for that purpose. Are there any questions?
Any questions for the applicant? Vice Chair Boyle.
Just about the parking question, the property across the street is the former Big B's location, is that
Yes,
what you're
it is.
referring to? And I noticed when I was in that area on Sunday, that there are new signs posted about permit parking only and your car will be towed.
Hopefully you weren't towed.
No, I spend my Sundays in that area, and I never park in the Big B lot because that's not where I'm headed. And Sundays, there's not really a problem parking in that area. But so are those permits that have been sold to people that are parking in there? Or, I mean, you're obviously enforcing the parking there for people who aren't supposed to be parking there if you've got a tow-away sign.
Right. Well, we don't have a fitness center yet, so they can't park there. If we had a fitness center, we would be able to allow the people who are using the fitness center to park in that space.
So my question is, are there spaces in that lot that are already dedicated to another use?
No.
Okay. And did you mention that to planning when you were discussing the parking for these plans?
No, they never mentioned the reason that they denied the permit, other than we would have to submit an SUP amendment. They didn't say it was because it was recreational. They didn't say because it was a parking issue. They just denied the permit.
Okay, and there was no discussion with them about what parking you would have available. They just assumed it would be the parking that was a part of that particular building.
It may have come up. I don't know whether parking actually came up in the discussion. It was never indicated that I'm aware of that it was an issue, but, and again, if it's brought to our attention, we're able to deal with it because, as I mentioned, we have a parking structure underneath our building that we can allow residents from other facilities that we have in the area to use, because it's not used to capacity, to be quite honest, at all times. And again, we have the 270 lot next door. It's across the street from this facility.
Thanks.
Commissioner Wolf.
Does DTN own any other buildings in East Lansing in B2 zones that have multiple family housing in them? In other words, similar to the situation this building is in?
To be honest with you, I'm not certain. I mean, I can confirm that. We own commercial space. We own the Carriage Hills Center, but of course there's no residential on that.
Right.
There's residential adjacent to it or across the street that are residents of ours.
So all of your apartment buildings are pure apartment buildings? 100%?
Not all of them, but in East Lansing they are.
Okay. I was going to ask if you had another building or two like that, what your experience was at other buildings, at those buildings, in renting the commercial space on the ground floor.
We have great experience at that because we own the Vista project at Eastwood. And that's the 4-story building at the back of Eastwood.
I can't picture what the retail is in that.
You can't, because there's very little retail there. Because it's very difficult to get retail occupied. That's a problem. On a lot of these mixed-use projects, part of the process is to provide retail or commercial space with the residential usually on top of it. And retail space is sometimes somewhat difficult to lease.
So I think you're saying that on the Vista project, you do have the same condition imposed on that the ground floor has to be left retail, that they would not let you put apartments on the ground floor?
No, it was, that is set up in I will call it condominiums. And the lower condominium on the Vista building is a commercial condominium. So it's always been designated as a commercial space and not a residential space.
Okay, it's a slightly different way of doing it, but it sounds like it's still the same, more or less the same requirement. The ground
Pretty
floor has
much,
to be
yes.
partial.
It
All right.
needs to be.
And we have heard this from other, we've seen this, you can see it going around town, the number of empty spaces in some of
That's
these
right.
buildings. And we've talked about it here in the commission before.
Yes, and as I mentioned, we'd very much like, if someone came along and said, hey, we'd like to take that 1,600 square feet you've got behind Bigby's for a business use of some sort, we would happily try to figure out some way for that to happen. But in the meantime, we thought, well, let's make it a fitness center that we could provide to our residents in the building and our residents in half a dozen other properties that we have in East Lansing, so that so there's a use of the space in the interim, and if at some point in the future we're able to bring in another tenant, a non-DTN related tenant, we would happily do that. But in the meantime, the space is being utilized.
So actually, that caught my eye in your report. You're saying that you would, if you set up the fitness center and then found another client, you would shut down the fitness center? And would that not cause ill will among your tenants or something? You know, that you gave that amenity to them or provided it and then took it away all of a sudden? It just surprised me to say that you would, to read that you would convert that.
Well, I mean, a valid point. However, most students don't stay for a great length of time. They're here for a few years, a couple of years, and there are other fitness facilities that they would be able to access. I think you can go to Planet Fitness for $10 a month. Yeah. So there's lots of competition for fitness centers, but we thought, again, we wanted to utilize the space if we could, and that was a way that we could utilize the space and provide an amenity for our residents. If at some point in the future we're able to lease it to another party, we do have other facilities with fitness centers that we could probably accommodate them if they would want to continue that. For example, Vista has a fitness center. We have most of our facilities have fitness centers. Doesn't happen to be one at 300 grand currently. And there are other facilities in East Lansing that don't currently have fitness centers. It's an amenity that you like to provide, but not all apartment complexes we have do have fitness centers.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. As I've said in the past, this is a public hearing, and so I'll take this opportunity to invite any members of the public who are still present to come forward and make a comment on this application. We're almost to you. All right, and seeing no one come forward, I'll close the public hearing and return this back to the commission. Any additional directions or questions of staff or the applicant? Commissioner Cahill.
I'm kind of confused between what we're actually doing here. Because there already is a special use permit for this building.
Correct.
Now there's a new, I'm confused between this and the next agenda item also. I can't figure out what's going on here.
Mr. Hayward, thanks.
It seems like this would be a modification of the special use permit, but it's presented as a new special use, and then I'm not sure what the next agenda item is talking about.
So I think I can try to help answer that. So, and that's really kind of how we approached it with the applicant. When they were proposing this fitness, at first, we weren't sure, is this for the, I think we made the assumption it was for the residences above. And if that were the case, it would be a modification to the existing special use permit, expanding the use to the first floor. Right? That's a straightforward, pretty simple concept. But then we understood that they were opening it up to other residents that don't live there, and then that becomes a use that's, now you're bringing in residents that don't live there. So the only way we could categorize that is a recreational use outside of the residential use. There is some crossover, but to us, it's not that facility anymore. It's expanding and opening up to the general public in some sense. So we had to categorize it. We gave them that option. We told them this is the issue. You have two ways to go about this if you want to accomplish this. Both are permissible, but you have to either amend the special use permit or get a new one. Which do you want to do? And they chose the latter.
Well, then when we also have to look at the previous special use permit to see if it's compatible with what's being proposed in this special use permit application? In other words, there could be some conditions in the other special use permit that maybe prevent.
It's a fair consideration,
What's being asked
we
here,
can look
if
at
we
that.
don't look at it.
Mhm.
I think the way, if I may, that was looked at is like, let's say that Crunchies moved into the suite, it would then be a restaurant that sold alcohol, which would be required of a SUP. So it's for the suite for this use to operate. So the recreational use requires a special use permit. So if the tenant that goes into the space requires a special use permit, they have to get the special use permit for that use. So if this was any other of the listed items that require a special use permit in the B2 district, then they would have to get the special use permit as well.
But that Crunchies would also be subject to the special use that's already in existence.
Yeah, but that's why we are looking for their own individual one here as well.
Well, or not. But it's fair that we will look at the other SUP
Yes.
to make sure there isn't any conflict. I
Right.
get that. We'll look at that.
Good point.
Okay.
Vice Chair Boyle.
Well, I guess my question is, the first floor of the current existing special use permit requires that it be primarily commercial or primarily retail?
It says non-residential.
Non-residential. So it could be office or,
Yeah, there's office in there. I
Okay.
believe there's a leasing office. There's the restaurant, which is a retail use. Then there's the recreational use proposed.
and if it's a fitness center that only serves the 300 West Grand River, would that be non-residential use?
Personally, I would consider it an extension of the residential use, which would then be modifying the special use permit.
Right, and if it were a fitness center that serves both 300 West Grand River and other specified DTN properties,
I would call it a recreational use.
then it would be a recreational use.
Yeah.
Okay,
I have a question, or maybe it's some questions about, the applicant sent us, there's a letter in here about their interpretation of the personal service use versus the recreational. And I guess first, I have a question. Okay, here we're talking about a fitness center. Would that be considered in the same category as say, a yoga center? Is that?
I think broadly we've put recreation together, like kickboxing studios that we've had try to come to, or
Right.
explore coming to downtown, gyms like that.
I think of personal service as there is someone there attending to your needs. If it's an open gym with nobody there helping you, then I consider that recreation. Like billiards, there's nobody there helping you with billiards. But if you're there to get your hair cut, somebody's cutting your hair. If you're there to get some other service that somebody has an expertise to provide it to you, you can't do it by yourself, that's a personal service to me. That's how I split the two.
Okay, but if you.
What they're citing is in the B1 district.
Yeah.
That's- it's not written the same way in the two districts.
Yeah.
And so When I
The
see-
definition in B1 does not really fit what you just said, though. That-
Correct.
The key in B1 also is that it says it takes up less than 25% of square foot or total floor area of an office use, which this is not.
Well, true, but it's actually the definition I'm questioning. And let me look at this again. I think I've got B2 open here. So B2 says personal service shop, such as barber shop, beauty shop, etc. That's how they define that. And that's a permitted use, a non-special one.
Both of those would be somebody there
Personal service.
giving
Providing
you
a
a
service.
special
So-
attention and a skill.
So would yoga fit under that?
Yeah, I mean, there's somebody teaching that typically. They're
Okay.
showing you how to do it. They're
All right.
and
The reason I ask is that to me, it would seem very similar, the fitness center and a yoga, because you're going there for a physical activity.
I understand that.
Yeah. And we do have yoga facilities that are operating without special use permits in B2. So I saw that as kind of a conflict here.
Yeah, it's,
Right.
Zoning is this way sometimes, and it is difficult, and we have to make these close calls, but that's.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
And we're willing to, I mean, and we've said this, we say this to customers all the time, that if the planning commission were to give us a very clear direction, hey, a fairly unified message to us that you disagree with it, we can certainly consider that. I mean, if you want, if we're kind of in this together in the sense that if your interpretation is different and can convince us of that, we'd be glad to listen to that.
Okay. Oh, Commissioner Cahill.
It strikes me thinking of the other proposed, Jim, that one of the issues was there was just going to be a card entry. There was no one there to help you or teach you anything, and that's one of the reasons why it was rejected, as I recall.
Yeah, and I think a little bit beyond that too. The space involved in that building on the first floor was quite limited, and it was divided into two areas. And one area was clearly a suite for the purpose of occupying it for some use. The other one was questionable whether that was lobby to a stairwell and access to the building as a lobby as opposed to an actual retail suite space.
I think.
I think it was maybe 700 square feet or something like
Leasing
that.
office at the time that they were going to vacate.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay. All right. Commissioner Wolf?
Yeah, that actually reminds me that on that other one of the questions was whether they had any changing facilities, any lockers, the kind of things that you would commonly find at a fitness center. And now that I think about it, I don't recall seeing any in this project. They were not talking about any putting in a restroom even?
There is a restroom, I believe.
Oh, separate, okay, yeah, right, on the west side of that building. Yeah, I suppose that might suffice.
Yeah, and in this use, as we define it, recreation or not, we don't have a specific requirement for lockers or any other than what would be required in the building code for facilities such as restrooms.
Right, in the other one, we weren't talking about it as a requirement, but as what
How you
would
define
typically
it.
be found at a place, especially if it was open to the public and trying to get them to pay for memberships.
Okay, we have good direction then? All right.
I believe so.
Okay. That'll move us on to item 6D, modified special use permit. This is an application to modify a special use permit from Gateway of Lansing, of East Lansing LLC for the property at 300 West Grand River Avenue to convert retail space on the first floor to 6 dwelling units. Mr. Parcell?
I
Oops.
believe that the applicant requested this be postponed until the end of March.
I just wanted you to say so. But you'll need a motion.
Yes.
As outlined on document number 1. Commissioner Cahill?
Well, here's where I'm confused. We just dealt with a special use permit application. Now we're adjourning.
This is a different request.
This is a different request to convert other vacant retail space to residential units.
Oh, okay.
So these are separate.
All right.
Commissioner Wolf.
I'll move that we accept and approve a request from Gateway of East Lansing LLC to postpone until March 25th, 2020, their site plan and special use permit application to modify the existing retail space to become 6 dwelling units on the first floor of the west side of the existing mixed-use building at 300 West Grand River Avenue.
Support. It's been moved by Commissioner Wolf and seconded by Commissioner Kusler to postpone the motion until our March 25th meeting. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, that motion carries. Moving us on to old business. Item 7A, a lot split application from Kathleen S. Edsel for the property at 920 Narcissus Drive to split the lot into 2 lots. Mr. Hayward. I'm not sure who this is.
Jake's gonna.
Okay, Mr. Parcell.
One second.
Thank you.
But they do it, so they have to come here and they.
Did you dig into this?
A little bit, but I can bring us up to speed as Jake's finishing up. I think at our last meeting or several meetings ago, an issue came up about some of the minimum lot standards for the proposed lot width or the proposed lots. Understanding the applicant at the time provided information that there may be available space with another adjacent lot that they can borrow some of the land and that to make up for some of the lot size issues associated with the 2 proposals. So what the applicant has done here is just that. They've retooled their surveys to borrow a sliver of land from, I think it's 1026 Daisy, and afford that area to the other 2 proposed lots spread evenly, gets them just over the minimum size requirement, which completely eliminates the need for any variances specifically, but still does require a waiver from City Council for the lot depths. So with that, Jake would take any questions in just a minute.
Sure. And I see the applicant is here as well.
Yes,
Any questions for Mr. Parcell?
I gave a quick overview already. We're at questions.
It sounds like there's a potential need for a waiver, a variance.
There'd be a waiver for the lot depth. All variances, the need for any variance would be eliminated with the new proposal. Everything is in conformity with the split this way. Okay.
Any questions for Mr. Parcell? Sorry, that was my bad.
No, you're fine.
And the applicant is here, although if you'd like to add anything else, I think.
Hi.
Dr. Edsel?
Hi, John. No, I have nothing else to add.
Thanks.
So if you have any
Thanks for
questions.
being here.
No problem.
And thanks for your
Was really-
patience.
I do have a house built out of structurally insulated panels, so if anybody wants to see.
Exactly.
SIP at work.
There you go. Thank you. Any questions for the applicant or for Mr. Parcell? Commissioner Cahill, did I see your hand?
I had a question about how the lot depth is calculated, which direction?
So lots are, the orientation is defined by for residential lots, the orientation is defined, the front is defined by the narrowest edge facing a street.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the front of one of the lots will change.
Correct.
The corner one.
And will all the other houses on that street have the same depth?
Thank you.
So if you go down Daisy Lane, my house on Daisy Lane at 1026 will have the same depth as the 2 lots, the 2 newly created lots, just they tend to be long, facing the street, and shallow lots at my house and the 2 out, well, 1 house next to it.
Your house is not the one that's on the
Well, I
lot
own
right
two
now?
houses right next to each other.
Okay.
So the 920 lot, which currently faces Narcissus, the back part that will be split off will face Daisy, and then I own the house next to that on Daisy Lane, which I will give up 3 feet of that lot so that we can create the two 5,000 square feet lots from the 920 Narcissus one.
I see.
But the depth of your lot is a little bit deeper than these two, right? Because this parcel had something taken off the north edge of it.
Correct. You are
So it's a
correct.
difference of like 7 or 8 feet or
I think
something?
it was 9 feet.
Yeah.
That was granted at some point to the two lots to the north.
Right.
Other questions for the applicant or for staff? No. Then a motion would be in order. Oh, I'm sorry, was there a question?
No.
Oh, Vice Chair Boyle, sorry, please.
I would move that we recommend to City Council that we grant the requested lot split as set forth in the staff report.
And there are 3 conditions indicated in the staff
Yes, subject to
report.
the 3
Yep.
conditions listed.
Second?
It's been moved by Vice Chair Boyle and seconded by Commissioner Wolf. Is there any discussion on that motion? And the motion is recommended. Oops. Oh,
Just,
yes, thank you. That's
Just
discussion.
transparency, I just wanted to mention, I'm friends with Kath, and we hang out, and our families hang out together, in case anyone has.
I'm friends with Dan, I'm friends with Dan.
Good.
I'm friends with John, I know his mom really well.
All y'all recuse yourself.
Thank you.
In addition,
Commissioner.
I'd like to say that it was great that, staff and the applicant were able
Absolutely.
to sit down and
Yes.
work out those troublesome things that come up when we try and apply the ordinance to real-life situations.
Yeah, I want to add to that when this came in, I was a little dismayed by it at the number of variances it was going to require and so forth. And finding this solution for it was excellent.
Further discussion? All right, then we'll call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? That motion carries. Bringing us on to item 8A, the annual report, which was in your packet. This is, I presume, an information item for which we do not need to accept or reject, but it was
Yes.
interesting. It is interesting.
Actually, it would be good to have, and I apologize for the lack of not having a motion on that, but it would be good to have a motion, I guess, authorizing it to be forwarded to council as required by law, that we're supposed to prepare an annual report for purposes of informing the elected body. And this just is a summary of the actions that we've taken.
There. But Commissioner Wolf, thank you.
I'll move that we approve and forward to council I'm not sure what this is called, the Planning Commission Annual Report for 2019.
Support.
It's been moved by Commissioner Wolf and seconded by Commissioner Kusler. Any discussion on that motion? That this would be forwarded to City Council? Then we'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? The motion carries. Moving us on to item 8B, by way of reading, is it simply enough this will provide public notice that we'll be changing the March 11th, 2020 regular Planning Commission meeting to March 18th, 2020 at 7 p.m., presumably for election conflict issues.
Correct, but I would appreciate a motion to approve that date change.
So moved.
Support.
It's been moved by Vice Chair Boyle and seconded by Commissioner Kusler. Any discussion on that motion? Commissioner Cahill.
I would just mention I'll be out of state on that date.
Very well.
Well, that may be a reason to move it to the 18th.
Why do you think, no, I'm teasing.
So we're scheduled to see the lot split zoning and site plan trifecta on that day. Any other discussion on that motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? Motion carries. Item 9, Commissioner concerns. Vice Chair Boyle.
Well, just quickly to say that I'm pleased that council determined to go ahead with the housing survey, which I think will not only assist council, but assist the planning department and this commission with making decisions on proposed developments. And I'm really pleased to hear that it's going to be done faster than I might have expected, at least hopefully so. And I really think it would be important. I know several of council members last night spoke of having the housing study completed before they made determination regarding the Bogue Street properties that are proposed by Core Development. And I would certainly concur that although I know the new plans may come back to us before the housing study is committed, making a final determination on that project, or final recommendation, we don't make the determination, it would be of great assistance to have some of the information that I hope we're going to get as a result of the housing study.
It's talked about a lot, and referenced a lot in terms of helping the city and the planning staff sort of guide our next steps. Any other concerns? Commissioner Wolf?
Just on the same subject, the impression I got from them was that they were probably going to have us give our opinion about the project before the housing study was ready,
Well,
right?
that's the way it's timed, certainly.
Yes, exactly, and I was a little disappointed at that. I certainly would prefer to have that for our vote, but obviously it's most important that they have it for their vote.
Other concerns? No?
Can you remind me when our next work session is? Don't we have one before planning?
We do not.
No,
Yeah,
not
there was one potentially
Okay.
scheduled for next Wednesday, but that's,
Okay.
unless that there were, this sort of, because we planned several months out, to my knowledge, there's not one, currently in the works.
Okay.
But there will be one.
Wasn't there gonna be one on the 18th?
Yes, there was. At 5:30.
One.
Not anymore. Oh, I guess we could.
No, we could.
Wasn't that gonna roll into?
Yeah, we could do it and roll it into the
Oh,
meeting.
that's right, we were talking about 2 consecutive meetings.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I misspoke.
Yes,
So-
I have it scheduled on the 18th.
The 18th, okay. So we'll have a work session
5:30,
then planning.
Never
And-
dull moment.
Thank you.
Any remaining concerns? Then a motion to adjourn would be in order. Moved by
Second.
Commissioner Kusler and seconded by Commissioner Wolf. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed. We are adjourned at 9:30.